Is Russia a weak ally? Are they a bad ally? Are they so weak that they actually can't do anything militarily for anyone that they may be aligned with? If you read the Western press, that's certainly the execution or expectation and the answer to what it is, especially as it relates to Iran, because Russia has been relying on Iran for drone reactions and several other kinds of economic deals that they have had, et cetera. And so the concern was, or the question rather, was when before Israel attacked Iran and then the U.S. joined in, what would Russia and China do? And so we pretty much have seen militarily, there was almost nothing that they did. So the question is, did Russia fail Iran, or was there a different kind of relationship between the two? The answers may surprise you in some cases, and we have one of the best guys to answer this question that we can have on our show is one of our popular guests, Andrei Martyanov, a veteran author and Russian military expert, and host of the YouTube channel Smoothie X12. Andrei, it's always a pleasure to have you on board today.
Anytime, always a pleasure.
Well, let's just jump right in here because as Gary had that headline up there a second ago, the media in the United States here is basically saying that because Russia didn't do anything to stop the United States or Israel, their alliance has been wavering as they suffer major blows. What is your just kind of off the cuff comment on that?
Well, it's Western media, which is basically dumpster. They don't have real experts, and again, the journalism is not a craft or a profession, really. So they write all this propaganda. Remember, Russia was also running out of missiles 3 years ago, and that, Ukraine had the wonderful successes in driving Russians. So, I mean, it's a repetition of the same thing. Those people have no integrity, honor, or professionalism. And again, journalism is not a profession. So, and they write what they are told by the editorial staff, which owned by all kinds of the people who own those media. And the question, of course, there's always they lie, and they do not understand what so-called alliance, or rather cooperation between Russia and Iran entails. If they would have followed the proper development of the Russian-Iranian relations, which were always not easy, and they would know that, for example, they have the economic cooperation, comprehensive economic cooperation agreement. But Vladimir Putin never says anything just because. And the reason he stated on the 16th of June, I believe it was on email 15th, that we did offer full military cooperation, air defense systems to Iran. Iran declined. Why did Iran decline? Well, it's obviously they will never tell you in the U.S. media or Western media anything. The reason they declined, because Mr. Peshkan, the president of Iran, and his basically group or SWAT, or if you strata of the urban Iranian intellectuals, all those people, they're very pro-Western. Many people do not understand, especially in urban centers in Tehran. Youth especially, there are many pro-Western people, and the only thing they wanted to do is to cure the favor with the West, thinking that because of their, declining their Russian military cooperation, they somehow, what will be invited back to the Western fold. Boy, they were wrong, but looks like this particular type of people in Iran, as they are, is true pretty much anywhere. They do not learn. And as the result, we saw ourselves what happened. And then suddenly, there's a very interesting detail, which I spoke actually about in length. They ratified, the Iranian parliament ratified Russian-Iranian agreement on the cooperation and economic sphere in already middle May. Guess when it went to the signature of Mr. Peshkan? Next day, once the Iran started to be hit by Israeli. What had happened? So they were waiting, being naive, or maybe not naive, they have their own interest, obviously, that, West will appreciate this, and then they will lift the sanctions, and they will return our money, and Iran will be part of international community. So they got the lesson, and now suddenly we have Minister of Defense talking to Mr. Belousov, Minister of Defense of Russian Federation, first on the phone, then meeting him in China during Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting. You have Mr. Arakchi, Foreign Minister of Iran, flying, last Monday to Moscow, speak to Mr. Putin. What has happened? Why such a flurry of activity from Iran? Well, simple, because now essentially what happened, Khamenei, by special edict, he basically transferred, because of the circumstances of what essentially the war against Iran, most of the military political power to the core of the guards of the Islamic Revolution, effectively, sidelining Mr. Peshkan, who failed miserably. So, and Russians, I mean, you cannot help the patient if the patient doesn't want to help himself. So I guess this chapter in Russian-Iranian relations is over, and I'm pretty sure they're discussing now full-blown military cooperation, up to the point of which Iran was always sensitive. Even when Russian bombers, for example, which were flying against, to launch against the targets in Syria at the time, they would land and will be refueled in Iran. They already have been very kind of stingy about it. But yeah, I mean, the lesson was pretty effective, I guess.
I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about. I was talking with Alexander Mercurius earlier this afternoon, after we had done a show earlier, and we were talking about this issue here, and he said something that I was frankly not very knowledgeable about, and wanted to ask you to maybe explain a little bit to our audience as well. And he said, you have to understand that there has been over the centuries, 5 different kind of conflicts between Russia's or the Soviet Union against Iran in the past, to include during World War II. So he said there's not exactly a lot of great relations between them, even though it's been a little bit better of late. So I wonder if you can kind of explain a little bit what the challenges and difficulties and opportunities are between Russia and Iran itself.
Do not forget, while United States was big Satan, remember Khomeini, well, guess who was the smaller Satan? Soviet Union. I served there, believe me, I know. So it's not like there are always complex relations. Don't forget, indeed, that British and Soviets, they went in 1941 and essentially split Iran, because obviously Shah of Iran was very pro-Wehrmacht, very pro-SS, very pro-Nazi. He supported Hitler. And so, because obviously there was Iran would become a very important route for the Lend-Lease, British and Soviets essentially made sure that Iran was under the control of what that time big 3, allied powers, and Iranians obviously didn't like it. But the issue goes even further, of course. In history, a famous Russian poet and dramaturgist and incredibly intellectual man who was Mr. Griboyedov. He was slain together with the Russian embassy in Tehran in early 19th century. So it's not easy relations, never was, And obviously Iran, a great country, great culture. They are very proud of their, Zoroastrian and Persian heritage. And as any country such as powerful as Russia, when you have something like that, you always try to play all kinds of different vectors in your foreign policy. But once the Soviet Union collapsed, things started to go improve, not completely, but there were very many things which Iran was going to do for Russia. But they still retained this enormously powerful pro-Western streak in their political life and in culture, which is normal. People, they call it Western. It's not necessarily totally Western, but and they always wanted to gravitate towards, the West. And one of the critical things, just when what was 10 years ago, 10 plus years ago, when United States and Europe essentially they lifted sanctions for a very short while. The first thing, though, those people in Iran did, political top, they rushed to the West, ordering Airbus aircraft and things like that, while the Russians already were telling, guys, you will be screwed over. They will cheat on you. They didn't listen. Well, guess what? Several weeks comes down, and sanctions are snapped back on them, and there you go. So, but this time, because it was so much kinetic, so then suddenly, yeah, they have to really come into the meridian, so to speak, and say, good Lord, yeah, they were warning us all along. And that's exactly what happened when suddenly, again, the flurry of the Russian-Iranian activity that Russia said, okay, come to Papa, finally, you learned, guys. Let's now sit and let's now discuss the situation, how we have to approach it from your security. Because Iran, obviously, is critical part of the Caspian, let's say, the alliance between Russia and Iran, and it's enormously important country by any measure.
Well, let's go. Let's look a little bit more in detail of what Vladimir Putin has said. This first clip we're going to show here, I believe, was on the 22nd of June. So, or maybe the 21st of June. I think it was before the U.S. had joined in with this, but about a week after Israel had started bombing Iran.
Relations between Russia and Iran. We support Iran in its struggle for its legitimate interests, including the interests with respect to peaceful uses of the atomic energy. And this has always been our position. This is our principled position, including in this conflict. It has never changed. And those who claim that we should have done more, well, what more?
Right. So that's the real question there, that people were, many in the West anyway, were saying, oh, well, Russia was supposed to have this relationship with Iran to defend them, and then now here comes this war, and Russia does nothing. But you said that prior to this, and this is something I didn't see, I think you said on the 15th or so, like the second day of the attack, that Putin had said, hey, we offered them.
Yeah.
If you could tell us a little bit more about that, because that's actually news to me.
Yeah, the only country with which Russia has the full-blown military alliance, which is the mutual defense pact, essentially, is North Korea. But in terms of Iran, obviously, it's a different country, it's different culture, it's different everything. So, and plus it's rather very complex, Islam, Shiite civilization. And so, Putin went on the record and stated we offered that, including air defense systems. What they have in terms of air defense systems, which still actually performed rather well once their first 10 hours passed after it was sabotaged, and it's primarily by the internal activity and diversionary and sabotage activity from within the Iran. The question was like, yeah, we offered you, and the only thing which they did, what Iran did, they bought 2 resonance radar, which is extremely advanced radar. It sees any kind of target and actually capable to develop firing solution against hypersonic targets, so any kind, stealth, what have you. So, and they do have those. But in terms of air defense complexes, they are all Iranian made. The only Russian air defense complexes which they have in Iran are around Bushehr nuclear power station, and they defend there specifically Bushehr nuclear power station and large group of Russian specialists who work there. But before even the start of the attacks, Tel Aviv and Washington, they made sure that they informed Moscow. It was called and told that, don't worry, we're not even going there, we're not touching it. So there you go. The rest of it was entirely up to the indigenous Iranian air defense system. And they actually kind of worked once the first shock and paralysis of the, especially cyber attack, was overcome. So they started to operate properly. So, and it's just the way it is. And how to say it, they are, the only thing I can tell you, and that's probably maybe some bomb for everybody, Iran now has Su-35s, and this is confirmed. And it's not 2 Su-35s. Another matter that we don't know yet if they managed to shake them down to start using them, which I think at least a couple of them have been shaken down and we're ready to use, because there is a confirmation that at least one is F-35 has been shut down, and it wasn't shut down in the by the air defense complex. Most likely it was shut down by the air-to-air missile in the airspace of Iraq. And Iran actually, and there was a video of that too. So, and but other than that, evidently things now will accelerate. And Iran, obviously, the next thing which they did, and again, you have to understand, you know this as well as me. Those people who go out with journalist degrees, they have no clue about modern war, about technology, nothing, So you have this now other thing, which somebody drops this bomb, oh yeah, they will be buying J-10, the Chinese, fighter. Maybe they were discussing this for the last 20 years of buying the J-10. So, and they do not understand. While they're discussing, they already are receiving Russian Su-35s, but they obviously presented this that what? Oh yeah, they're gonna use the J-10, which is, by the way, completely different class of the combat aircraft. With Su-35s as being the heavy twin-engine, extremely advanced air superiority fighter, while J-10 is a kind of light fighter. It's essentially Chinese version of F-16. So, but they continue to present it like this because this is what they do. They lie. I mean, this is what they do. They lie for money. You can buy them. They're all prostitutes. Sometimes, a figure of speech, or sometimes literally, So, and that is why when you kind of look attentively at how they try to present it, their task is to spin. This is what they do. But obviously, most of them will not understand basic facts of the warfare and international relations. So, because they're dumb and they write this garbage and it's being consumed, So, and that's simple as that. But again, we have to wait and see now how much it will accelerate between Russia and Iran. We know it will accelerate because especially
that's something mitigating against that. I wonder if you could speak a little bit about both before and after this attack here, and that is in Russia's relationship with Israel itself. And as one of our guests here or one of our people who've been watching our show says, but there's a lot of Russians living in Israel. So how does that affect Russia's decision, and even before this attack here, in giving military assistance to Iran if it's going to be used against Israeli attacks?
Oh, it's already being given. That's the point. And the people on the right that, there are so many Russians. There is about, I believe, 1.2, I could be wrong, million of the Russia citizens of the Jewish descent. If you're ethnic Russian, forget about it. I cannot become that, even if I wanted to, the citizen of Israel. You have to have Jewish mother, okay? So those people, doesn't mean that all of them hate Russia, but many of those Russian citizens of Israeli citizens too, some of them have other citizenships of France or United States. They don't like Russians that much. Not all of them, but some portion definitely. But because Russia has working relationship, diplomatic relationship with Israel. There is how to say, absolutely normal kind of give and take type thing here. And what can I say? Just to give you example, many people do not remember. When in 2018, because of the Israeli attack on Syrian forces from Lebanon, what they did, Syrians shot down by accident Russian electronic warfare IL-20, which went down with the home. Yeah. Well, guess what happened? Just to understand, for people to understand that how real relations work, not these fantasies, they take from comic books and all this media garbage. Israeli general staff people flew to Moscow immediately to mitigate the issue and explain that it wasn't done on purpose or it just happened this way. Because Russia said, you were the guys who were hiding behind the IL-20, so what I'm saying, they flew immediately to Moscow. That explains basically that, there is a relation, there is definitely exchange, and but Israel is not friendly country to Russia, it's obvious, but Russia maintains diplomatic relationship. So what does it mean? That Russia has to go and break off the diplomatic relations with Israel in favor of Iran? It doesn't work like this. serious countries, actually, with the serious foreign policy, they actually spread themselves, especially superpowers, and there are only three. They have all kinds of variants, in the international relations, and they have all kinds of relations. Russia has the mutual defense pact with North Korea, but if not, for example, of the United States interfering, Russia had excellent relations with South Korea. Excellent economic relations until recently, even during the special military operation. So it's like, it's not this or that, either or. It is always or many, so, and you have to go with those options and you have to develop relations. And
so let me ask you, one of our viewers here just asked you a question about the F-35. If Russia has, I guess, trying to balance relations between both Iran and Israel. But you said a second ago that you think that an Su-35 shot down an F-35 from the Israeli side. That's something I'd not heard about. Was there some news on that, or do you have some sources?
No, we have some sources. We have the video of the F-35 being shot down, but my people tell me that Russia delivered. In January, most U.S. media already posted that, one of the Ruslans came in, and most likely it brought Su-35s to Iran. So it was in the English Anglophone media all over the place. So since then, there were more than two. Let's put it this way. How many, nobody knows. But we assume there are 4 or more. The issue, of course, here that, you have to teach the Iranian pilots properly. They obviously trained in Russia, but then you have to shake down the unit. You have to do it within the framework of the support, like, the airbase support and, provision of the spare parts and services and all that for especially such a complex machine as Su-35. So the question was, which is probability. It doesn't mean that it's 100% certain. We don't know. It was always covered with a lot of fog, so to speak. But F-35 was shut down, and most likely it was shut down by Su-35. Because it looks like it, even the newer air defense systems of Iran, they do see, all those stealth targets and all that. But the point is that evidently something shut down by air-to-air missile. And Russians obviously not going to give Iran R-37 with the range of 400 kilometers, which is an insane weapon. It's the longest range missile in the world, air-to-air missile. But they certainly will provide, and most likely they did provide, this R-77, which obviously for some reason they call it Amramsky, because it's similar in performance to AIM-120 AMRAAM, but it still has longer range than AMRAAM. So, we have to wait and see about that. But I can tell you one thing for sure, Iran does have a possession of Su-35s now.
I see. Well, I guess we'll keep an eye on that too. I want to go back to Vladimir Putin, because one of the things I think he's trying to give some support to the Iranian side, and he says something that it's just flat out accurate, regardless of whose position you want to be on, and that is what the United States was threatening Iran with. Was basically that they couldn't have any reprocessing, which of course is a complete violation of the non-proliferation treaty that we're a signatory to as well. There's no international legal basis to attack a country based on that, and Putin was addressing it.
Иран выполнял все взятые на себя обязательства по известному соглашению, о котором мы сейчас упомянули. Все. К Ирану невозможно предъявить никаких претензий. Затем Соединенные Штаты в одностороннем порядке решили выйти из этого соглашения, а европейцы продолжили требовать от Ирана, чтобы он выполнял взятые на себя обязательства. Это, вы уж меня простите, но это какой-то бред. Не Иран же вышел из этого соглашения. США вышли. Бывший президент Трамп взял и принял решение выйти из соглашения. А европейцы говорят, да, это не очень хорошо, что американцы вышли, но вы, иранцы, все соблюдаете. С какого хрена-то иранцы, извините, так по-русски звучит грубовато немножко.
So he's going a little bit apparently rude in Russian to say that.
And it wasn't nonsense. He said delirium. Actually, when he said it's not a nonsense, the wrong translation. He said it is some kind of delirium. Basically that's what he was saying. So, I mean, today we know the result. Peshkan signed the pause of the cooperation with the, which everybody speaks now. It's a CIA, MI6, Mossad, International Agency for the Atomic Energy. So Mr. Grossi, he's asset, basically. Everybody knows he's an asset. It depends on how many simultaneously. He's probably both, Mossad, MI6, and CIA asset, among other things. So Iran is not cooperating anymore. They achieved what they didn't want to. So, then probably Iran will get the nuclear bomb at some point of time. And
what's going to happen next? What between Russia and Iran? What's going to happen now, do you think?
Well, there will be a lot back and forth regarding the nuclear weapons, because there is also yes, indeed, there is a religious aspect to that. The fatwa, which is issued by the supreme leader against nuclear weapons. But what's going to happen now, Russia will accelerate the rearming of Iran and training its forces properly. So, and we have to wait and see, because it's really fresh. It just have been a week, since things kind of settled down in terms of the ceasefire. But and again, we can only guess what Mr. Belousov and defense minister of Iran were discussing in China. So obviously they were discussing what have been stated by Mr. Belousov, and Mr. Belousov was unequivocal in its statement during the meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization that they will be trying to create all kinds of the troubles, along the perimeter of Eurasia, So, and we have to be ready. And one of the key anchors of this readiness is obviously Iran. And as I already stated, I hope they learned, I think so they did, their lesson. And judging by today that they stopped cooperation with the International Agency for Nuclear Energy.
Well, I guess we'll see where that goes from there. In a related development, again, in the Western press, is that America's enemies in the region, because of all the stuff that's been happening with Iran, have been weakened. Gary, if you can toss that headline up there. Because it's kind of basically saying the wars in both Ukraine and the Middle East are weakening America's enemies. Russia's war in Ukraine and Iran's conflict with Israel have backfired, weakening America's adversaries and strengthening deterrence, sending a signal to China and bolstering U.S. global credibility. But I just have to ask, that's yesterday's news, but I just have to ask your view, because also in yesterday's news, the United States admitted that we are cutting off our giving, 155 millimeter artillery shells, air defense interceptor missiles, and a number of other kinds of weapons because we don't have enough. So we have tried to do something with the Houthis in the Red Sea. That went nowhere. We ended up stopping that because we were just throwing these missiles away. We've obviously just now used a ton of them in Israel with its attack against Iran and the missiles that came back, et cetera. So it seems to me that we're in a weakened position, and yet the news seems to think that we're in a strengthened position, and China and Russia have been weakened. How do you see it?
Well, I mean, they're clowns. Again, we've been through this before. United States currently doesn't have competent military leader on the top brass at all. It's just pathetic, actually, So, they have to spin things. What do you expect from them? So, and the question is that, the Western press has been completely discredited, completely. And when you look attentively, especially when they rely on the Kagan's cabal, in the Institute for the Study of War, or Mr. Petraeus or Keane expressing their opinions, laughable. You cannot, again, clown cannot judge a clown. They are clowns. Okay, and so the only thing they know is how to do propaganda and spin things. But the reality is, today they have the new appointment of the Inspector General, which is, of course, the equivalent of the Chief of the General Staff of Bundeswehr, this Major General. And the dude was delivering those forecasts for the last 3 years, exactly about the same, that Russia is weakened and you cannot fix moron. It's like explaining, trying to how to say, comment on some madness, psychobabble, and saying, let's find the rational, the any kind of the common sense seed, but we can't, because
Well, and in fact, along that very line of logic here, this was America's U.S. ambassador Whitaker went on Fox News this morning to explain that this is really not about any kind of just because we're running short. It's just because, hey, we got to have America first.
yeah.
Give us your reaction to the U.S. holding back now on these weapons to Ukraine.
I think the most important thing to know is that this is what America first looks like. We first have to take care of the United States needs. And this is something the Pentagon does all the time, make sure that the United States has the strategic defense capabilities necessary to project power. And so we have to make sure that we have enough Patriot missiles and we have enough air defense and all the things that we need to ensure our own success on the battlefield, wherever that battlefield might be. You saw our great capabilities on the B-2 bombers when they dropped the precision-guided bunker busters on Iran. And so, the world wants that. We saw that with our NATO allies last week. They want to be allied with us so that we can bring those capabilities. And, we just need to make sure that we have what we need at any time to deter and defend ourselves.
But we don't. We don't have enough to do that. And I played earlier on a show early this afternoon from May the 20th when Secretary of State Rubio went before everybody and admitted we're not going to give any more to Ukraine. Even at that time, he said, because we don't have them. And I doubt anybody else is going to want to give them up. And now then here a month and a half later, after a bunch more were used both in the Red Sea and against Iranian incoming missiles, we just can't manufacture them fast enough. So what does that say to our potential adversaries around the world who recognize how few of those missiles we have?
Oh, I mean, obvious things, and Russians are honestly laughing all the way to the bank. And don't forget, the warnings about U.S. running out of all those things have been issued, including by me already. By when Biden was still in the White House, or whoever they ran his whatever avatar. Yeah, Sullivan, Blinken, people who have no clue about anything related to the actual real life. And so, yeah, they can go and bloviate whatever they want, but they are sore losers. So this Whitaker guy, I mean, get him into the corner in some, private setting and say, do you believe this BS which you're spewing yourself? He probably is dumb as a stump, he may believe. But there are some people in Pentagon who still retain, degree of understanding of how operations are planned and what kind of resources are matched to the strategic goals. And they cannot be not appalled by looking what the United States have become, a laughing stock. U.S. militarily is a paper tiger. Everybody knows this now, and the question is not only I repeat it, I can repeat it again. And if the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff wants to debate me, I'll be, with great pleasure. But United States Armed Forces have the TOE, Table of Organization of Equipment, and strategic views, which are stuck in 1990. They are 35 years old. They are utterly obsolete. And I don't know why this Whitaker guy, talks about the projection of power and about Patriot missiles. How the heck Patriot really helps to project power? So, but it can defend theoretically. It doesn't do a good job doing this, but that's about it. And these people just go out, they drop those terms, those hot button, words, the keywords which are important. It's basically becoming 1984, like people who were coming out talking on those party meetings, just producing sounds, that sound bites, and people listen to it. What the hell did he just say? I don't know.
And speaking of Orwellian disinformation or dystopian, maybe a bit more accurate.
Yeah, it's dystopian. Yeah.
Let's go over to the Russia-Ukraine war and kind of take a look at where some of the Western experts are talking about this. And on Sky News earlier today, I think
good Lord.
You had Clark Professor Clark was asked about the Russian summer offensive and about the amount of territory that the Russians had been taking. Some people had been arguing that, well, it hasn't been that much, but in his attempt to say it's not a big deal, he's kind of illuminating that it is.
The spring offensive drifted into a summer offensive where the Russians are bringing forward a lot of troops all at once. But they now look as if they're trying to threaten different areas. So apart from the areas in the Donbass, Luhansk and Donetsk, which they've been fighting for so hard, they now look as if they're trying to threaten Sumy and Kharkiv in the north, 2 other oblasts. And they look as if they intend to get into Dnipropetrovsk, which is next door to Donetsk. It's further west. And the Russians are claiming that they have taken Dazhny, which, if they have, is on the Dnipropetrovsk side of the border. So the Russians are trying to extend their offensive, if only to distract the Ukrainians, to actually give them more territory to worry about, more areas of the border that they've got to cover. Whether they can really make a significant inroads into any of those areas is doubtful, because the Russians are at full stretch at the moment, and they're not being very successful. They're being very, very slowly successful, even though they've taken more territory in the last month than they have for the last 2 or 3 months. But nevertheless, it's very slow progress at very high cost.
So he says Russians are not very successful. And then in the very next sentence says, well, of course, they took more territory in the last month than they have in any month since May, which was the most that they had taken since November of the previous year. So you're on a definite trend going up here. And the Ukraine side is still losing men like a sieve every day. So what do you make of that?
It's a British military education, quote unquote. I can quote your friend. He's not my friend, but I'm sure he knows about me. Douglas McGregor. It's a Lilliputian force with the pathetic vocational school called Sandhurst Academy, where they believe that they can make a cadre officer in 44 weeks. And then they throw those morons, who learn basic things, basic tactics, into King's College or the so-called general staff, courses in, so-called academy for like a couple of months. They learn some things. So they're basically incompetent. Mr. Clark is also incompetent. And as I already stated, any professor of the operations and history in the King's College, they are simply unqualified people. They don't know what they're talking about. They are sore losers. They have a huge butt hurt because Britain has been, it's a third world country. Basically, that's what it's, reducing itself to now, and it will be there fairly soon. Depends, if you give or take a few years. So, and when those people go out and pretend some things which, it's ridiculous. You cannot comment on delirium unless you are a psychiatrist, then you begin to talk the psychobabble professionally between each other. But you cannot describe it. Those people invent things which are not there. And the question is not, again, as I already stated, demilitarization and denazification implies what is happening right now, physical annihilation of the forces, and Russians do it extremely well. But in terms of the great cost, he has no clue what he's talking about. Most of those morons wouldn't even understand what they're looking at if they're taken out and transplanted for 2 days in Moscow, St. Petersburg, any Russian city. So for them to feel very inferior, so it's like you cannot explain to them. They are that stupid. And again,
I even as I listen to it, I think you're trying to make the argument that Russia is not succeeding very well because they're advancing slowly. They're inflicting casualties at a pretty unsustainable rate. But leave that aside for a second. What would you be saying about the Ukraine side then if they're losing slowly? If you're looking between the two bounds of the side, if the Russians are allegedly not doing very well, then how would you characterize the Ukraine side? And of course, if you did, then you're going to have to come to a different conclusion other than what Keir Starmer said.
Oh, good Lord.
I told President Zelensky at Downing Street on Monday that we will harden our resolve. We struck an agreement together to share battlefield technology, accelerating our support for Ukraine's defence, while boosting British security and British jobs. We committed to providing hundreds more air defence missiles, paid for not by the British taxpayer, but with money from Russia's frozen assets. And together with Europe, Canada, and our Indo-Pacific partners, we announced that we will deliver 40 billion euros of military aid to Ukraine this year, matching last year's pledge in full. There is a path to a just and lasting peace, but it will only come through flipping the pressure onto Putin. His position is weaker than he claims. So I urged all our partners, including the US, to step up the pressure now with more sanctions and more military support to bring Russia to the table to agree an unconditional ceasefire leading to serious negotiations.
So it could be, Andrei, that what he said there at the first of that clip was that all this money we're giving to Ukraine, this whatever it was, $40-60 billion in a year, was to boost UK security, which is weird to say, and UK jobs. So maybe it's as simple as that's what this is about, because it's not about any kind of actual strategic reality.
No, it's not. It's all lies. That's the result of inbreeding, So essentially, the United Kingdom finally reached the final, and that's what they are. And not all British people, by no means. Political class, that's who they are. So United Kingdom doesn't have any technology. It is utterly dependent on the United States in practically every single aspect. Challenger tanks are pathetic. The metallurgy is the third world. When you have mobilization of your turret after being hit by cornet, that tells you that it's just pathetic. And so I don't know what they can provide. Air defense of Great Britain, good Lord, it's pathetic. And from the professional military technological point of view, I don't know what those people. They live in the alternative universe where they still think that they're a great empire, they can control somebody. But essentially, basically, the only thing they can do, Great United Kingdom today, is terrorism, pretty much, and sabotage. That's the extent of their military capability. So, and in this case, again, I have to basically comment on delirium. The only thing which they want to use those interests from the frozen assets, well, they were piracy based, for centuries now. So nothing new here. Robbers, so they rob Russian money. So that's what it is, So thieves.
Yeah, that's unfortunately that's just part of this whole issue that we always want to lecture everybody about: rules-based order and this, the rule of law. And then here we are, basically.
They're stealing money. They're stealing money. So it's fine.
And we're not even at war with Russia. You can't even claim that. That's something between Russia and the Ukraine. But let's take a look, though, about what the Russians actually are doing. Whether this is a slow or a fast success, it is still moving to the west. It is still conquering territory. It is still killing Ukrainian troops, as you say, demilitarization, according to the Russian definition of that. There was a report out, I think it was just today, by Dmitry Medvedev, who claimed that Russia has added 230,000 additional troops into their army this year, and they hope to have another 300,000 in the second half of this year. And as you see on the screen there, Russia has been building for quite some time, basically an operational reserve that's not in contact, that can be used, that hasn't been used so far. First of all, let's take a look at that part there. What does that tell you? If Medvedev's numbers are accurate, that they continue to build up the size of their force, but they still haven't employed all of them. What does that mean?
Again, it means the same thing which I was stating nonstop. This gigantic reserve actually isn't there just in case if NATO decides to commit suicide and introduce some kind of force, then of course they will react and they will move to whatever the operational direction or strategic direction this threat will come through. That's what they are there for. And secondly, they will be introduced if Russia decides that enough is enough and it's time to go and take. That's the problem. Russians are already operating in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. They are deep into Sumy Oblast, and even Putin stated, he said, well, we will decide when times come if we need to take Sumy. Russians can take Sumy if they decide to do so. So it is now again about physical annihilation of the whatever is left of Ukrainian army. And so, when they will decide to introduce those big arrows, although let me tell you, obviously those arrows were getting longer and bigger for a while now, and suddenly you have those cauldrons, which are measured not 1, 2, or 3 kilometers, they are measured like 4, 8 kilometers, in width, and they're trapped there, not 1, but 2, 3 brigades. And yeah, when you look at the dynamics of the losses of the Ukrainian side, it's just catastrophic. And it's not a secret. Everybody saw it. They take 70-year-old men from the streets. Can you imagine 70-year-old soldier? Great soldier, I guess, right? So they take women now, and 14-year-old kids, 16-year-old kids, Hitler youth all over the place. So yeah, that's what it is. And Russians will continue to kill them until there's nobody left, or until they overthrow the government, or until there's something else, which Ukraine probably will disintegrate. And then Russians will say, okay, let's discuss the political arrangement on this case. We'll take this.
What's really odd, actually, before I get to that next question here, I want to stick with this theme here. You mentioned that Russia is building up its forces in case something happens and they actually have to fight NATO. We've interviewed here on this channel here for last few months a number of different Russian people who have actually fought on the front line, especially in the drone warfare, and we've been interviewing some folks to talk about the changing nature of conflict, and how the best two armies in the world right now are the Russian and the Ukraine armies, better than anybody else in NATO, better even than the Chinese and the United States. I mean, all of them combined, because of the experience. One of the things that really stood out to me that's consistent with everybody I've talked to, even on the Ukrainian side of the line, is that with the proliferation of the various categories of drones, that it's nearly impossible to have this big, like a tank army blasting through somewhere, because the minute that you get in any numbers, it can be hit with both artillery, missiles, and especially with drones. So the two sides have kind of got into this equilibrium where, especially on the Russian side, they're prioritizing firepower, as you mentioned, even in the Sumy area. So they're doing it steady and slow, as Professor Clark talked about. But here's the question. If that force were to be used on a NATO country that doesn't have all of those drones in the quantities and in the categories that the Ukraine side does, what can we expect from such a conflict on the conventional level?
Well, even with the drones on Ukrainian side, you can expect it, because obviously I'll send you the photograph after we're done here of the this spring. You have this rows of the latest versions of the T-14 Armata tanks, without the Mongol yet, but they are being developed to the front. No, tanks are fighting there, and they fight quite well, not only from the enclosed firing positions, but actually, and it has been recorded many times all over the place. So it's not correct to say that it's just somehow drones stop the development of the tank warfare, for example, especially when you have the firepower and fire impact capable to suppress any kind of the drones, not to speak about the fact that as it's all over the place. You can see now the latest, they are already in serial production, anti-drone drones. Some of those drones are multiple use. They can shoot down and disable all kinds of drones. I mean, of FPV type drones. So it's not like, oh my gosh, drones took over. No. Obviously, as always in any kind of the issue between the sword and the shield, at some point of time, shield will work and will win. And then, of course, the process starts again. So, and yeah, there are countermeasures which are already there. There are countermeasures on the tanks themselves. So tank warfare is not going anywhere. And especially, as already stated there, it depends on their Russians love to do it. Obviously, it's what is called fire preparation or softening. You know how to do it. You did it before. And especially when you bring what Russia has the best in the world, this massive artillery power, no drone warfare can compare to this. Again, the Tornado MLRS, which is the latest missile of the Tornado multi-launch rocket system, it can fly up to 105 kilometers. A single salvo of this Tornado, it's two soccer fields essentially, basically turned into glass. So nothing lives there, So it doesn't matter if you're hiding there somewhere, because it's a vacuum, thermobatic, explosions and things of that nature. So it all depends how you plan operations. That's it. Oh, you obviously will get hit here and there, no doubt about it. But the problem, of course, is that it's all on operational level. And when we look attentively at as I already stated, everybody says, "Oh, where's this BMPT Terminator?" It's there. It fights. It's just that if somebody didn't capture it visually, oh yeah, they don't use them anymore. They used all of it very well, including, for example, T-14 Armata, which is the latest thing. So, and
at least from what I've heard from the Russians who've been doing the fighting, they say that they use less of that armor because it can be hit easier. So they use it. They definitely don't say, they definitely corroborate what you just said there, but they don't lead with it like say during Desert Storm or during Operation Iraqi Freedom, etc. But here's my concern, at least from our perspective. I'm not sure that the Western side has learned that lesson. So I fear that the U.S./NATO would, in a conventional fight with Russia, would try to do what the Ukrainians did in 2023, which is lead with all this armor, and then you see it pile up in just boneyards. Basically, becomes a boneyard there. And the Western side, as much as I can ascertain anyway, does not have drones in the quantity that the Ukraine army does, which is still makes it very difficult for the Russian side to. That's one of the reasons they do go slowly, but they do go. But if you don't have that overwhelming number of drones on the Western side, what's going to happen when those two armies clash?
Oh no, they will be defeated, obviously. But there's a much greater problem for, God forbid, if NATO decides to do something. Assembly areas, okay? No army in the world moves anywhere without assembly areas. First, if they, God forbid again, if that conventional conflict of this starts first, the ISR, U.S. ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance satellite constellation will be largely disabled. Not all of it, but it will make things in terms of the tactical and operational awareness very difficult. And then, of course, you have assembly areas, and when you have the proper recon, Mr. Iskandero, Mr. Areshnik fly in. And let me tell you, if even the assembly area of the brigade combat team, if you take about it, you saw yourself what Areshnik did to Yuzhmash. They still are afraid to show it properly. So, yeah, single Areshnik, 36 warheads, it's over. The whole brigade is gone. And there's nothing which can stop it. So it's much deeper, much more profound war, even before it gets to the, indeed, what is called close tactical type. You remember what this counteroffensive, you know what? They never even reach the first line of defense. Everything have been slaughtered in what in U.S. manuals, operation manuals, or field manuals called the security zone. Russians call it the zone of the provision, or for a field. They also, which pretty much the same thing, where you make the enemy to start, building yourself into those columns, company or battalion columns and all that. You did it, So, and in this case, they never reached in the first line of defense. And they were not only drones, they was just absolute pummeling them with the long-range fires. And artillery played the most crucial role here, because it was what is called Stavitsky. It's not really Surovikin line. They shouldn't be attributing things. Obviously, Surovikin was in charge of the operation, and he was the big honcho who developed it. But it was Mr. Stavitsky, Lieutenant General Stavitsky, who was, of course, and is the chief of the engineering corps of Russia, who did that in such a way that they created those cross zones, almost like Kursk, in a sense, much more advanced, of course. And they basically wiped the floor with this. 160,000 people killed on Ukrainian side. And that was it. That was the end of they tried, of course, Kursk, killed 80,000 there, but you know what? What can I say?
Yep, that's kind of where it was. Well, we'll have to wait and see how all this stuff. And I agree with you when you keep saying, God forbid that we should do that. And I pray to God we don't ever do that, because it would just be a losing proposition that nobody would benefit from, and certainly doesn't ever need to be fought. But listen, we really appreciate you coming on today and providing such clarity to this, and especially some of this information we hadn't known before about that Russia had said, we offered to help to the Iranian side, but they didn't want it then. We'll see how it does now. Just reminding everybody here, go to Smoothie X12 on YouTube, and you can see more of Andrei Martyanov, as you can see on the screen right there. Listen, thanks so much for coming on. As always, we really appreciate it. Thank you. And we thank you guys too. Be sure and like and subscribe if you haven't. And we will see you tomorrow on a whole new lineup of stuff you're not going to want to miss on Daniel Davis Deep Dive. We'll see you then.